Full space, white face. Look, when you press it, it switches it off.
They call me Fuzz-Tone. They call me Fuzz-Tone.
Hey everyone, welcome to Gear There and Everywhere. I am here with Paul, Dom, and Ryan, and today is all about pedals. A little bit of fuzz, as you heard there. And today actually is the release day of the company Acclam. Just released a new Beatles fuzz pedal, the Mocker. Any thoughts about that, guys?
Well, so
Pretty
it's
cool.
supposed to be a more accurate representation of the Vox UL 730. Is that right?
Yeah, so they already did the Dr. Robert, which I actually have here too, but they decided to just focus on the fuzz circuit.
Now, I watched the demo video they did today, actually. So the AI Beatle voices was kind of cool. That was pretty cool. But the pedal itself sounds pretty good. I like it more than the Dr. Robert pedal, actually.
Yeah.
They've honed it in a lot more.
We'll have to do a comparison. I'm going to get the Mocker soon, so...
Only limited to
definitely.
200 pieces?
Yeah, because they use the right diodes. We're going to get into all that today, but first...
Funny because it's more of those pedals than there were of those amps.
Right.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, the amps were
funny,
rare.
actually, yeah.
But before we get into mid-60s, Ryan, do you want to take the early fuzz pedal history?
So the first fuzz stuff that the Beatles were interested in was the Maestro. But before that, well, we got to figure out who was the first person to use fuzz to begin with. And the first instance of fuzz that people are aware of is this Marty Robbins song. So I will stream this real quick. Yeah, so this is the Marty Robbins song, Don't Worry, which came out in February of 1961. I don't know if it would have been recorded in late 1960 or not, but
it says
anyway, it does say
recorded
in 1960. Yeah, and so this was not a fuzz pedal, but I'll just let you guys hear it first.
Understand. Don't worry about me. Sweet.
Which is
Ooh,
way better sounding
that
than
was
you would
cooking.
expect for the first iteration of something like this.
That
sounded pretty good.
Is that a bass?
Yeah, that was a bass.
Oh, man, that was cool.
Which, I know I'm bringing this up early, and excuse me for it, but isn't it funny, though, when you think about it, how the first distortion or any of that type of tone sound is first recognized by bass? I mean, it seems like everything was just bass with distortion. It's like, I don't know why they associated a fuzz tone with bass. Like, why? And
Some
then
people
wonder
just-
why one day somebody was like, well, let me play the guitar through that fuzz. Or that,
Yeah.
that, like, all right, keep going.
Well, we're about to get into that because so that was a complete accident, actually. That was a faulty channel strip that got crapped out, and they had a big argument, like, do we keep this in or do we redo the song? And they were like, it's kind of cool. Let's throw it in. And then everyone wanted that tone. So that's where pedals actually first came into play, was how do we recreate that sound?
It's funny, I'm thinking about it now, a lot of some of the greatest inventions ever were accidents. They started off as accidents. I think, what was it, cornflakes? May have been an accident. I think chocolate chip cookies.
I can't remember.
I don't remember. So like some like food that was like a staple was an accident.
Like cocaine and Coca-Cola. Like, who knew that would...
Who knew that would have been bad? I don't know.
Who knew that would have been such a great selling tactic? Yeah, well, I was going to ask, do you know, I can't remember if that was something where that song, was he playing bass directly into the board at the time?
That's a good question. It could have been in the amp and then the channel either way.
So that has to be
was faulty.
I guess, yeah. Which is interesting because if he was playing into the board, I feel like it's most likely he was playing into the board, but I don't know. I can probably just go read it real quick. It doesn't say. It just says that it has a faulty channel in the mixing desk.
But it was eventually reverse engineered
actually,
into the Maestro
it wasn't.
fuzztone.
It was a 6-string baritone guitar, not a bass.
Oh wow,
But
close enough.
yeah,
It's like a
close enough.
bass 6 kind of.
Yeah, bass 6 kind of thing. Which actually,
Dan Electro.
it did remind me of. There's a Love and Spoonful song that's distorted bass 6 through a guitar amp, I think.
Yeah, there's some other Nashville recordings around then, like Elvis, that they took that sound and they recreated it.
Oh, it's super
So that's
cool.
actually what is funny about what Paul was saying is like, why did it start as like a bass thing? Why was fuzz associated with bass? And it's so the Gibson Maestro Fuzz-Tone was the pedal that they invented to recreate that sound. There were a few prototypes before that, and we can talk about that in a second, but the Maestro Fuzz-Tone, if you go on YouTube and look up the demo for it, like how they were selling
that's
it,
right.
they were marketing it
Yeah.
as like, make your guitar sound like a saxophone or sound like a tuba. Like they didn't know that it was going to be like a cool fuzz, like rock and roll thing. It was
Right.
more like a weird novelty, wacky box.
Well, think
this-
about it though. Distortion at the time. You look at Link Ray and what was that song?
Was it Red Rocket or something like that? What?
No, it was the
Rocket?
one. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, that's Link.
Rumble.
Rumble.
Rumble, yeah. What's
I mean,
the thing
that-
I'm thinking of?
it was
Rocket
banned.
Rocket
48.
88.
88.
Rocket
that's right.
88,
What year is
yeah.
that from? 60?
That was.
Or
That was like in the late
50s?
40s or something.
Yeah.
Was it?
That was an
But
early
like
one.
the fuzz was all distorted guitars were known to incite gang violence.
Of course.
It was banned from radio. So I mean, how are
Yeah.
they supposed to market a fuzz tone
Yeah.
like that?
Well, I mean, sometimes
Devil's
maybe that
music.
wasn't the case back then, but you could certainly go with the argument of like, too crazy, it gets banned. Like that's a marketing tactic in itself.
So we know the Beatles. We know the Beatles had one.
Yeah, let me go through a couple
Right.
examples before that.
Yeah.
So possibly the first instance of a fuzz pedal on a record. I'm not exactly sure if this is right, but it's at least one of the first, and it's notable for the Beatles. Is the song "I Just Don't Understand" by Margret,
Oh.
and I'll play a little bit of that first.
Well, you call me your baby.
And I don't know. Have you guys heard
Again,
that
bass.
before? Yeah, again, bass again. So that's an interesting one because the Beatles. That's a song that they were interested in and they covered themselves. Which obviously they did not do it. At least in the recording we have, they didn't have any fuzz pedal on it or anything. But surely they would have experimented with that and tried playing that at some point when they got that fuzz pedal. But that's not the Maestro yet. That's a different custom made one. I found it on some forum. They said what it was.
What was it?
It was
Was it like something super obscure
handmade
that you
pedal
can't buy?
by
Yeah.
studio guitarist / arranger Billy Strange, who did
Okay.
session work for Phil Spector,
that's
Beach
cool.
Boys, Elvis.
Yeah, I know Billy Strange. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually didn't know him. But and then in 1962, is this might be the first use of the Maestro on a record? Sam's
Yeah,
not.
that's
One
what
of
I
the
saw
first,
too.
yeah.
2,000-pound B. I
Yeah,
found
this is
that
by the
same
Ventures, and I'll
thing.
play this one now. And that's
See,
obviously
that has.
a bit more controlled of a sound.
Well, that sounds way more in line with a Maestro.
Yeah.
Can I say that might be the first time also distortion was played on a guitar? That sounds like that was a guitar.
Yeah.
I like the Ventures, by the way. You
Yeah,
know,
Ventures
not
are
too.
good.
Oh yeah.
The
Yeah, there's
Paul,
some
they-
examples.
I'll tell you what
Go
you
ahead,
had, son.
Ryan.
I was just gonna call out Paul because he said that all 60s.
Because I hate everything. I don't like 60s
Yeah,
music.
he said
and
all
stuff
music
like
that wasn't
and-
the Beatles sounded dated. And
Get outta here.
But I do like the Ventures though. Because
they
I
are
like that
good.
Surf and you know,
Yeah.
Walk Don't Run. That was like one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar.
What about
by
the
second,
Shadows?
So.
Shadows
Great, yeah.
I never liked
Cliff
Dick Dale.
Richards.
Yeah,
I do like Miserlou. That was a good
that's
song.
a good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a egomaniac.
Well, there was some good like 50s or even late 40s records where the only amps they had were little boxy tweed things that had no headroom. So you do hear some like blues records and like some early R&B stuff that has like distortion kind of unintentionally, but I can't think of any examples right now. But like it wasn't a desirable effect yet.
Yeah, so, but apparently for the Beatles, it was interesting enough for them that they went and got a Maestro, and it shows up in a couple of session photos, so I'll show some of those. The first one I've got is this one, which is,
And
this is on July 1st, 1963.
She
So,
loves you.
This is on the
They
session
did
for
She
She
Loves You.
Loves You.
Yeah.
So George has only had the Country Gentleman for a few months at this point. And, you know, he's showing off this Maestro Fuzz-Tone here.
And it's his dial-up mute, Gretsch, too. It's not his flip-up mute.
Yeah. So his
Yeah.
first one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if... Do you guys think he would have been playing the same guitar part, but on this Fuzz-Tone? Most likely.
maybe.
Sam, can you play that descending bit real
Yeah.
quick for us?
Well, so we got the way he plays it on the record. I feel like it would sound bad with fuzz because it's really
There's too many
harmonic and
notes in
stuff.
there, yeah.
That sounds bad, but if you do,
Try with just octaves.
like together,
Yeah, just like
the same
because he
time?
was doing that on Please Please Me. He might have done something like that.
sounds like Smashing Pumpkins or something. It's cool to think about though, and apparently George Martin did not like that idea at all.
Understandably. I mean, it would have blown the desk probably.
Yeah, I don't know, but that probably wouldn't have. You think that would have affected sales at all?
Maybe. There's a chance it might have. Yeah, I think so.
On the pedal itself or the sales of the record?
The
The
record.
sales of the record, not yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know, but it all depends. Who knows what it sounded like?
Well, I mean, think
maybe
about it.
George could have spiced it up really good.
I mean, parents already didn't like the Beatles. This would have just reinforced it. And they said,
That's true.
these guys are even worse.
So what
Although
is it?
George Martin was in comedy records, you'd think he'd be into the novelty of it, but
Maybe he would have thought of putting that with like a fuzz tone like that through a talk box.
Oh, oh no.
That could have been good on a comedy record.
I
Do you like the
that's
Tom
bad.
and Jerry wah, 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 wah. Or what is it? Peanuts.
Charlie Brown, yeah.
Yeah.
Womp, womp.
That could have been interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay, so it's on, it was tried on She Loves You. It was also tried on Don't Bother Me.
Yeah, we've got a photo of that, but that's not George this time. That is John. I'm
That's
pretty
John.
sure. So, John's here. This is also just a great photo. This is September 12th of 1963. Recording of Don't Bother Me, which we know from a few photos later because, well, we know the date, but also George is reading his lyrics off of a sheet in the music stand.
All right, well, first things first, though. We know that John is playing that do 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 do.
Is that right?
That yes.
I thought he was doing the tremolo.
I don't.
because and then on the floor, and you can see. I know mine's more egg shaped than the one he has, but it's for my AC30 to control the tremolo.
Yeah, so
Whereas,
let me
that's what
Paul,
you see
show
right
that
by
again.
his foot in that picture. There it is, right there, the little egg shaped.
So this is like a little button to turn on the tremolo on your AC30.
Yep. And of course, mine's egg shaped back in the '60s, or those early JMI ones would have been more round and big, like the one you see in the picture. But
Yes.
yeah, definitely for the tremolo. So I mean, but maybe they were
what he's got right
experimenting.
there.
double track me. Well, they have double track on that. Yeah, they were overlay and stuff.
They were on.
Yeah, they had
they had
overdubs,
2-track. So he's got that, but he's got this Fuzz-Tone next to him. Dom, I've never heard the thing about John being the one playing that. I thought that he was doing the tremolo, which shouldn't he be playing the tremolo if his foot's on the tremolo?
Dom is right, because George is singing, and it would be hard to do this while singing.
I'm pretty sure he's playing just the chords underneath. Like, it's so
I
buried
smell
in
another
the mix.
episode, boys.
Oh,
Let's save
boy.
it.
Start arguing.
Well, regardless, John's using some kind of tremolo, and he's got this Fuzz-Tone there, which George Martin also did not want on the record.
Right.
So that got scrapped, and there's no surviving evidence of it or anything.
Now, how much do you think that would have changed the record? Do you think he
I don't
still would
think
have
it would
played
have
that
been-
riff?
I don't think it would have changed it too much.
Or how about this theory? Maybe Paul was gonna use it on his bass guitar, and it was just next to John because John was activating it for him.
That is a pretty.
Or
good
maybe Paul
bass
stepped
line.
away,
I
and
mean-
then Paul's gonna use his bass through it.
Right.
I mean, John could have been turning on the tremolo for George, because or
Could have been.
clicking a button for George because he did the thing on Babies in Black.
He
If he was reading lyrics, I mean, anything was possible at that point.
He didn't have the coordination.
Yeah, George talks about later. Well, we'll get to this when Sam talks about volume pedals, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that for now. So those are the instances we are aware of the Beatles using the Maestro Fuzz-Tone, and so they didn't ever make it onto the record, but I'd say it all worked out well enough, and they got another fuzz later on, which Sam will talk about. But the popular use of the Maestro, the most popular.
Can I say
following
one
that-
thing?
Yeah.
What happened to those recordings? Could those ever possibly surface?
I don't.
Or
I think
are those
it's
definitely wiped out?
I don't know if that was ever actually recorded. They might have just been doing it because usually they had arranged the songs in the studio, unless it was like a pre-existing song. But a lot of these, like "Don't Bother Me," they probably brought in that day, and then just sort of figured out the arrangement. I mean, I know that sort of happened with "She Loves You," because George Martin had the idea for them to do the chorus at the beginning, and they came up with the sixth chord in the vocals. I think on the day. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if this stuff just wasn't recorded. Now, "She Loves You," the masters are definitely gone, which is why it was only ever made in mono up until this new red and blue thing. Because singles were only released in mono, and albums were both mono and stereo. So if you were on a single that never made it to an album, they never did a stereo mix, and then if the masters ever got wiped, then you're gone. And so the masters got destroyed for "She Loves You," so that no chance of that. If that was ever recorded, that's never going to make it out. But
That's too bad.
Would have been cool.
I don't remember if we have anything for "Don't Bother Me," but I doubt that was recorded either.
Would have been kind of cool to hear it though.
Yeah. So, but the thing I was about to say is the most famous use of the Maestro is none of these things. Is the Rolling Stones' "Satisfaction" from '65, recorded in May. So a full 2 years after the Beatles were messing around with it. And you can see here Keith Richards has a Casino. Maybe he was using that or a Les Paul on the record.
There it was. That was.
Yeah, I could hear it on that one.
Did you click it twice? It sounded like, or would be possible? Oh, I know. He switches down. That's treble with Maestro on. Then you hear him switch the or flip up into the middle position on the switch,
Yeah.
and then you hear the click
That's
of the
probably
foot
what
pedal.
that was.
Well, yeah, he's using the neck pickup on the verses there.
Mm-hmm.
No question. I mean, that's humbucker all the way. I mean, that's
And then
Les Paul.
switching down for
Yeah.
that because maybe it gets a little too muddy, maybe
Yeah.
or something on that. Guitar.
Yeah,
You
Yeah,
know, and then
Casino
the
would have
switch in the
fed
middle.
back too, probably,
Yeah.
right?
That's true, yeah.
So
Yeah, so that's... I mean, I think that's all the major uses of the Maestro that are worth mentioning right now.
I would
If you
say
have other
so.
ones that you think we left
Got
out.
to get you into my life.
Is that the Maestro?
Is it?
Well, what about
I think Sam's got more to talk about.
I don't know.
Well, hang
Alright.
on. Before that, let's talk about the first song that the Beatles had that featured it. and it was on the Maestro pedal. They say it was a 1.5. Is
Sam
the,
saying no.
I'll get into that.
Let's let Sam take over.
All right.
I think he's got more.
No,
of this
that
figured
you
out.
might be right, Paul. There's like a theory. So, okay, switching over. I'm actually going to share my screen. Okay, so the story goes that it was hard to get a Maestro Fuzz-Tone in. Here, I'll pull it up here. In England, I'm not sure exactly when Keith Richards got his, but they visited America a lot. They recorded at Chess Records in Chicago. But so for most British bands, you didn't really get access to fuzz, and the only option was the Maestro. So flash forward, there was some guitarist, it's debated who it was, but it might have been Big Jim Sullivan, went to Gary Hurst, who worked at Vox on Denmark Street in London, and asked, can you make a Maestro Fuzz-Tone pedal, because there's none that exist. It's debated who that was, but either way, Gary Hurst took the Maestro Fuzz-Tone design, which was very harsh, as you could probably hear in those clips, and made it a little bit smoother, and invented the tone bender. So there's some early prototypes of the tone bender in like wooden boxes like this. But this is more what it started to look like. So they call it Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3 because there's different versions of it. But the one that really, like the Mark 1 really looks like is kind of this like weird square cheese looking thing. And what's interesting is that the Beatles, as Paul was saying, the Beatles used a fuzz the first time on a record was Think for Yourself, the bass line. And it's debated what fuzz pedal that was. They clearly already had the Maestro Fuzz tone pedal, so it could have been that, but there's some reports that it could have been an early prototype of the tone bender. There's actually a little quote here that I pulled up. Further fuzzbox that the Beatles may have experimented with in '65 is one that Dick Denny recalled in an interview supplying the group with at the time. The model was a prototype for the Vox tone bender, but the use of the name tone bender should not be necessarily seen as evidence, but it was related to Gary Hurst, and Sola Sound was on Denmark Street. What do you guys think? Does it sound? Do you think it sounds like a Maestro Fuzz-Tone, or?
Well, how would you generally describe the difference, real quick, of the Maestro versus the tone bender?
So the tone bender is the circuit of a Maestro Fuzz-Tone, so it's very similar. But you can hear with the Maestro, it's very harsh. Like it almost sounds like you want to turn it off once you turn it on. The tone bender is a little bit more pleasant. I mean, it's very fuzzy and bright, but it's not like the 2,000-pound bee.
Right.
I mean, that could also come down to just recording techniques. I mean, they're on 4-track now. Maybe that allows them to work with it a little more. I don't know.
Sure.
But maybe not.
I can hear a difference, though. I mean, Sam, you're dead on with it. I mean, it's the Maestro is pretty harsh. But the tone bender, I mean, think for yourself, it doesn't hurt to listen to. It's actually... And same with Got to Get. I mean, it's very clear and articulate.
And we're pretty confident that the whatever fuzz tone it is on Think for Yourself, that it's played on the Rickenbacker 4001.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm. But there's also another Rick part, right?
Yeah.
Doing...
Or maybe a Hoffner.
Maybe Hoffner.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
I can't remember how.
But
early
either
that was in
way,
the session.
I'm gonna go back to my thing here. So basically, we don't really know exactly what was used on Think for Yourself. It could have been the Maestro Fuzz-Tone or that prototype bender, which could have looked like this or this. It's hard to say. But what we do know is Gary Hurst talks about giving the Beatles 2 tone bender Mark 1 pedals in November '65, and that is corroborated by this rehearsal, these photos of this rehearsal for their December UK tour, where you see George with the ES345 and John's Black Strat, and they have a continental organ, but you see clearly Paul is plugged into a fuzz pedal, and if you zoom in, which I found a good, where is it? Pretty good quality image.
Oh, wow.
It has that square shape, and it has the black two knobs, and you can actually see the logo is kind of like one line and it's black. So that's interesting because if you look here, the Mark 1, it's one line and it's black.
And they're close
Black
together.
knobs. Yeah, so it's definitely a Mark 1, and actually you see George, it's not only Paul playing his Hofner into one, you also see George, let me zoom in, playing another Mark 1. So they actually had two on that day.
George was real big on sticking these things on top of the amp, it seems.
So that's definitely a Mark 1 as well. So that was November 20th. It's 1965. Gary Hurst said he personally delivered 2 tone benders to the Beatles rehearsal. Yeah.
So are we thinking that those photos are the same rehearsal that he gave it to them in?
That's the theory, yeah.
And that's after Rubber Soul is done.
Exactly. So when did Rubber Soul? When was Rubber Soul finished?
I got the book right here. I'll live up to the meme once again.
But either way, Think for Yourself was before this rehearsal when they received the Mark 1. So Paul, your theory about Maestro Fuzz-Tone is very possible, but it could have been the prototype as well.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'd probably go with it being the Vox, honestly, just because I feel like I know for a fact the Beatles had Vox amps that nobody even knows about. There were certain prototypes. It's in the Vox book where when Denny and all them would make an amp, they would have such a rare prototype that they would bring it to the Beatles just for them to use, where it would just be a one-item thing, and then it would never exist again. Which I guarantee you there's probably songs that we're listening to that feature a Vox amp that was a prototype that never was produced, and there was only one of them.
Right. And I should say it's actually not... It wasn't necessarily Vox that Gary Hurst was working for at the time. It was Sola Sound, but they were somehow related. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Dick Denny, but yeah, it's
they were.
Vox
I know they were. They were
members.
related somehow. I know, but I'm just thinking that they possibly were given something that was a prototype by somebody, whether it be Vox or some other kind of a manufacturer, and possibly using that. But at the same time, I don't know. You know, it's tough to say. I'm kind of buying what you guys are saying on how the Think for Yourself's too clean. You know, it's just it's too smooth. Everything just sounds too tidy about it. Whereas I feel like Paul would be getting a lot more distortion, to be muddy or just be blah, 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 you know.
The Mark 1, also the cheese-looking one, was what Jimmy Page used on all the Yardbirds and Zeppelin, early Zeppelin stuff. So it and
Said
Jeff
like
Beck
over
as well.
under sideways down.
Well,
Is that right?
see, now Led Zeppelin, he had a 7120 head. And that's all I know. So he could have been also just using distortion straight through that 7120 on his stuff.
On Zeppelin, but earlier than that, he was a session guitarist. And he also
you're
used
talking about that stuff. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
like Yardbirds and other session work. Donovan, Hurdy-Gurdy Man, I think, was Mark 1.
Also, that would have been... I guess I have to mention it, because I always have to mention the Hollies stuff. Can I play you guys a clip real quick? I think Sam has told me in the past that this is
Holly Man.
Tone Bender.
Which one?
This Hollies song, Hard Year, which is on their 4th album, Would You Believe, from 66. This would have been recorded in, I think, like February, no, it's March. I think it's March of 66 is when this was recorded. And it's a very acoustic song up to this point, with no electric guitars.
So I've got to get back on my feet and prove to myself I'm a man.
Wow.
What year was that?
That's March of '66. That was recorded.
That's like, well, that's like what I think of, like sloppy fuzz.
Yeah, but
Not
Sam,
anywhere
you think
near.
that's Mark 1 tone bender?
I think so. I mean, it could be Maestro, but Maestro's so harsh. I mean, that sounded bright, and tone benders are very bright. But yeah,
And also,
I don't know.
I thought of that because you mentioned Jimmy Page, because a little later in that year, the Everly Brothers do the Two Yanks in England album, where they do a lot of Hollies tracks, including that song, and Jimmy Page was a session guitarist. It's not, I don't know if we're sure who played which guitar parts, but there is that guitar solo that Jimmy Page possibly played. There's some quote from Tony Hicks where he says something like that, where he's talking to Jimmy Page in the studio, and he's like, "Oh no, you can let me handle that part. That's too hard," which is really funny.
So that time period is like 65 to 66 is crucial, clearly, because I didn't mention when the whole tone bender thing happened was 65, early 65, and then you have Keith with Satisfaction, and then everyone wants that sound, but no one in England has a Gibson, so Gibson Maestro Fuzz-Tone. Maestro was Gibson. So yeah, like that's how all this really happened. Then we get into...
Real quick, actually, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Just because we mentioned it before. The Rubber Soul recordings finished on November 11th.
Oh, so late 65.
Yeah, 1965. So
and
9 days
the
before
rehearsal.
the rehearsal, yeah.
Yeah. So then clearly it wasn't those Mark 1 tone benders. Yeah, one more tangent about the Mark 1 was Pete Townsend had one briefly. He had a lot of fuzz pedals, but the cheese-looking one, I keep calling it that, he gave to Mick Ronson of David Bowie, who actually used it on like Ziggy Stardust and all that.
Really?
So if you want to know what that tone also sounds like, everyone knows Ziggy Stardust. Although he did use a wah pedal cocked like to get that weird sound too. But yeah, so that's the Mark 1. That's just the first iteration, as you can see. And then what happened was they were messing around. Gary Hurst made some other tone benders, but the next one is the Mark 2. Let me see if I can find a photo of the Mark 2 is the second one. So here we have the Mark 1. I'm sorry, this is the Mark 2 over here. So we move away from the square shape to a rounder enclosure. But what's interesting, so we have the Mark II over here, but there's actually something in between, which was a prototype called the Mark 1.5 is what we call it now. Back then it was just you either had it or you didn't know what it was. And the Beatles happened to have a Mark 1.5. And we know this because of photos from 66, Paul in Revolver. This is not the square enclosure that we see in 65. I have a better picture of it somewhere as well. That's not
That's
really
definitely the 1.5.
Yeah.
1.5. So,
Can
and
I ask
the
you
other way
another
to tell.
question about
Yeah.
that photo of all of them lined up together?
Mm-hmm.
In that photo you showed, the Mark 1 has 2 words instead of going across. What's the deal with that?
That's what, yeah, I was about to say that. It's so here's the Mark II, and it says professional, and it has some other copyright on it, but essentially it looks like the 1.5 other than that stuff. The 1.5, I have a better picture of it. I'll just go back to this. Yeah, so you can see the 1.5 does not have that logo on it, so it's just bare. And there's a better picture that you can see of the Beatles. It's the Revolver era, this thing. This is like a weird photo from Abbey Road. And if you zoom in, you see that enclosure.
Yeah.
I don't actually have, I guess, where you could see the logo, but
I've never seen that photo.
And I just want to make note, too, go to that tambourine that's sitting
What
there.
the heck?
Perry just made that video where a percussion, and he was talking about how he bought a brass Ludwig tambourine, and I think that's it right there. Is
That
that
guy's
the brass?
Yeah.
that guy's a mad genius. It's crazy.
That
Yeah,
also,
check out
Go
Gary
check out
Stanley.
Barry
That,
Stanley.
well, since we're talking about that real quick, that other thing on top of the pedal, is that a Guiro? No, down.
Oh, this is a Guiro. Yeah, the
Yeah.
one that you use on like Tell Me What You
Oh,
See.
yeah.
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 Weirdo?
It's all their
It's like
percussion
I
stuff,
have
yeah.
one. Let me go grab it.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
that
it's the
thing
one that
you know
you-
you.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
You know.
Grating the cheese.
Would you like cheese on that, sir?
Tell me when to stop.
Yeah. Olive Garden.
Unlimited breadsticks.
But that's like, I've
The
never seen.
breadsticks
Where
have
did,
gone down.
for real. Where'd you find that photo, Sam?
It was in a Revolver box set last year
Oh,
at the
that's
end of the
cool.
book.
That's really
Yeah.
cool. I've never seen that before.
It's got like
Play
Give us
it
a
for
little,
us, Ryan.
give
Let's
us a little
hear it.
example
I
of
think
it.
you're supposed to do it like this.
Yeah,
That's
kind
what's
of. Yeah.
on Tell Me What You See. Is that how you're supposed
Yeah.
to play it?
Yeah.
I've never seen it with that comb thing. I usually have like a stick.
Oh, I mean, because so you're saying the stick has the ridges?
No.
No,
but-
no, I have a Guiro, but it's like you just hold a stick to do that, not like that 3-prong. I've never seen that.
Oh,
That thing.
interesting. Yeah, I don't know. This came
a
with it.
fork.
This was probably made by some children in Puerto Rico.
Very
Wow.
cool.
That's
I don't know.
for free.
It's got this cool little painting on the front.
At what cost, Ryan?
I don't know. I got this and my the
Child labor?
claves that are on is that what they're called? Are they claves or claves?
Yeah,
That are
claves,
on,
something like that, yeah.
My And I Love Her video, which is my most popular. Those also have little palm tree designs, and I got
It's the
that.
one you
Those
wrote down
and,
the notes
and that
for the
and my
bongos
maracas
for.
all for $25.
Huh?
That's good.
Good deal.
I gotta stock up on that stuff.
All right. So, anyways,
Yeah, sorry to
get back to
derail your whole thing. So.
Hey, we got into a whole percussion episode all of a sudden. I love
Yeah.
it. Okay, so I'll just go back one more time to the picture of Paul because I'm pretty sure you can see there's no extra logo like the Mark II.
I'm
And
not
actually,
seeing it,
I
yeah.
think by this point, I don't even know if the Mark II existed yet. So either way, yeah, the Mark 1.5 is actually really interesting because the Mark I had germanium transistors in it. That's how it clipped and got the distortion. And same as the Maestro Fuzz-Tone, they used 3, and that's very important, the number, because the Mark 1.5 only used 2. And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but these circuits are so simple inside. I don't have a picture of it, but like every little detail, like which transistor you use, like where it was made, it all contributes to the sound. So yeah, the 1.5 only had 2 germanium transistors. It sounds a little smoother than the Mark I. It's not as bright and harsh. So yeah, we know that in '66 they had the Mark 1.5. Probably some Mark I's still around, I guess. But what do you guys think about that?
Interesting. Well,
I didn't even think of that.
I did
There's
wanna
such
ask-
a big difference.
the thing I was trying to ask before was the Mark I even has the lettering is offset on that Mark I picture.
Oh yeah, on the 1.5, it's the logo is like
well, no, on the Mark
tone
I
and
too.
bender.
On that picture that you sent, they were all like that, and that was kind of weird to me since you just said the thing
Wait,
about the Mark
what do you mean on this
I.
thing?
Yeah.
Well, you see, oh yeah, you're right. The Mark I.
What's going
Here
on with
has-
that? Was it rubbed off and
Yeah.
someone stuck it back on with a sticker or something?
No, I think that's the variations of the Mark I. I mean, this is the classic one.
Yeah.
But
It looks
you
like
also
there's
have
like
these weird
yeah,
ones too.
yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. That's also
So
a Mark
it,
I
it
there.
varies. This is a prototype Mark I.
Okay, right.
This is a Mark I, like a weird one. Yeah, and then later on, we get Vox actually released their own tone bender. The Beatles, as far as I know, never used a Vox one, but the Doors, if you listen to their records, use that or this one.
What's the if someone wants to get something to sound like these now, what's like the best thing to get?
I'm very biased. I like Analog Man a lot. Analog Man makes really good circuit, like faithful to the circuit, and that's what you heard in the intro. Is I have a Mark 1.5 is this one with the 2 germanium transistors. He does make one with 3 as well, but they're very expensive. It's not cheap to source those parts. So that's like over $250 at least. You could do a Keeley fuzz bender is a cheaper one with 3, I think germanium, maybe silicon transistors. I don't know if you guys know any other companies that do that stuff.
I've never really messed around with fuzz. The one time I did, think for yourself, I plug my bass into my $100 Fender Mustang amp, and I just turned the gain up all the way.
Well, wait a minute.
Sounds painful.
Doesn't JHS do the bender pedal?
Yeah, JHS just released some tone bender and fuzz face pedals.
I don't know how those are.
And a Klom, as I mentioned, just released the Mocker, which we can talk about in a bit.
Oh man.
But let me get back on track because there's a lot to get through. So yeah, we have the Mark 1.5. We know the Beatles use that on Revolver, but also they're seen using this weird thing, the Rush Pep Box, which was made by a guy named Pepe Rush. And it's similar. I don't know enough about the circuit, but it's very similar sounding to a tone bender. And you can see John using it here. I think this was, Ryan, was this Paperback Writer?
Yeah, that's April 14th. That's Paperback Writer. And
yeah. And actually, I think in the tambourine picture, you can see there might even be a, I don't know if that's the same thing, but
I can't remember if that's Paperback Writer or if that's the Rain basic track. I think
that's Paperback, isn't it?
Because Paperback Writer did overdubs that day. They overdubbed the bass and the Frere Jacques backing vocals. But I think that
this is
the basic track for Rain, actually.
So the Pep Box is very distinct looking. The knobs are on the outside here, and so yeah, we don't know what songs it was used on. They actually sell the Rush Pep Box now. Pepe Rush passed away, but his daughter still makes them. They're very expensive. They're like $400. But I mean, it sounds great if you've heard it.
I'm sure.
But we don't think
Revolver.
We don't think that was on Paperback Writer or Rain, right?
Doubt it. I don't. You guys don't hear just too much.
No,
I mean, we know
not
that
at all.
Paul used the
Casino
into something for
bass
Paperback Writer.
But that's
Bassman,
probably
wasn't it?
not. That's not fuzz. That's
No,
just distortion
not at
from
all.
an amp.
That was what Perry did recently. He did the UL 730 video, and he decided Paperback Writer was that because he had done the Blonde Bassman before, and it sounded close, but he kind of honed in on the
Something
the
is
box
always
thing.
missing when people cover Paperback. There's something missing.
I used the Dr. Robert
nobody's
when
gotten
I did
it.
it.
Nobody's gotten it yet.
What,
Someone's
Tom, have you
gonna
seen
get
my
it, though.
video?
Absolutely. I'll be honest. No one's gotten it. No one's gotten it.
Fair.
Sorry,
Well,
Ryan.
no, that is true. They there's this bit at the beginning, right after the first riff. There's this feedback. It's like this squeal, high pitched squeal. I've never heard anyone do that.
Oh, well, no question, Ryan. Yours is the most accurately played. No question. You even got the little B string hit. The open B string?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I just gotta go into real quick just saying about getting, emulating sound and all that with pedals and everything else and today's standards. And, it was like we have a group chat where everybody, us in the group, I'm explaining this to our audience, of course. So in our group chat that we were talking about this just earlier before this episode, and I was saying specifically the fact that you can't emulate it unless you have the actual item with the actual guitar. You don't get that exact sound, and I think listening to Perry Stanley's video that he just had out too, where he was going over the 730. Again, I disagree. I don't think the 730 at all was on Revolver. I think that was only the 7120, and then 730 they got late, and then that's on.
Well,
the Sgt.
doesn't
Pepper.
Perry? Isn't he implying that it's the 7120, but this is the same distortion, basically?
Yeah, it's same distortion. I'm sure the amps sound the same, even though it is kind of different. But but his sound he got was just so close to it. So, and I just feel like that having the right equipment really does help get that sound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you want to talk about the Vox amps real quick? You want to start? Let's get
Yeah, I
into
wanted
the
to
distortion.
contextualize what you were saying.
So, and I'll make the Vox portion real quick, but just so everybody knows, and I wasn't aware of this, but Vox was the first amplifiers to come with distortion. I know I probably mentioned that on a previous episode where we talked about that quick, but yeah, first amplifiers to come with distortion. What was the very first amplifier? The 7120. Was the very first amp ever produced to come factory with distortion, and of course it wasn't adjustable distortion. It was just by a foot pedal. And once you selected it on, it was on. And that's kind of how the solid states were in America. Technically, the second amp to ever come with distortion was the Super Beatle. And again, not adjustable. And once you select the foot pedal on, distortion comes on. Can't adjust the amount of it. And if you shut the amp off, unplug the foot pedal, throw out the foot pedal, you come back a year later, 10 years later, you turn that amp on, distortion will still be on because it's still set by those little whatever, how they have it working in there. Now, for the 730 and 7120, a few interesting things real quick. Excuse me. They used an OA200 diodes to chop up the peaks of the audio signal. So basically on the amps, as soon as it started getting too loud, it would start chopping up that frequency. The process, though, of that happening also lowered the overall volume once you switched on distortion on these old Vox amps. So what they had to do is create a gain recovery circuit using a TY1243 transistor that is no longer available, and no matter what, there's no substitute for it. Thus saying, if your amp, your Vox amp that you had back in the day had this, you could replace it and get your distortion working again, but it was actually prone to failing, and once you changed it to whatever would be similar, you'd never get that same distortion sound again. So for anybody that owns the 50 7120s or 730s that were ever made, if your amp had that changed, when you switch on distortion, you're not getting the same distortion they had, the Beatles.
Yeah, we
Now,
just saw
mention
with,
to that.
I was going to say we just saw
we saw that with the foot pedal.
that the with the 730s, only 100 of them were made, and 76 were taken back to the factory and destroyed because Vox wanted to go to solid state stuff.
Jeez.
So
And they
only
weren't
like
popular sellers.
24 of them are still around, and who knows how many of those. I mean, we
Well,
know
I mean,
Perry
those-
has one.
Didn't one sell recently for like some absurd amount of money?
Well, I've seen 730s and 7120s go here and there, and they're about the same price for $15,000. Do they sell at 15? Doubt it. They probably sell for maybe 10, 9, 8,
I think there is
12.
a 730 on Reverb for 16,000 right now.
Wow.
It's not going to sell for 16.
Well, I think that's what it's listed at anyway.
Yeah. There was one floating on Reverb for like 10 years with the guy wanted like 15 grand for 7120. These things just sit there. These people ask crazy numbers, but
Sure.
But going back to what you said about the Vox distortion, it's kind of similar to a fuzz, right? When you clicked on distortion on those amps, I believe it actually, I mean, you said diodes, but I also saw a picture of, this might have been the Conqueror. But
Now this is different though, right? Because the fuzz, the distortion
Conqueror
button,
was a fuzz, right?
the distortion button on the pedal is different from like there's an actual distortion on the. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
yeah, the distortion is built into the amp, and when you click it, it sends the signal to connect the thing together to then make distortion through the amplifier, whereas you're making the distortion through the foot pedal.
So they're two separate circuits, right?
Yeah.
Like so they're
Yeah,
two
so-
different sounds. So there's a distortion on those UL 7000 or 700 amps, and then there's later is when those 4-button foot pedals came on the solid state. Is that right? Or were those 4-button ones also on the 770 series amps?
Yeah, that's just how you clicked on the distortion. Well, the first amplifier ever produced to have adjustable distortion was just the Conqueror.
Okay, so that's not. So the 7120 is just the foot pedal button.
Just that. Yep,
Okay.
730 and 7120. Just click the foot pedal, whatever is there is there.
Okay, that makes sense. Because I wanted to contextualize it for everyone, because we're talking about distortion and not fuzz, and how does that relate? And I think the distortion mode on a lot of those Vox amps was like a fuzz, because I was showing you the picture of the Conqueror. It actually has 3 germanium transistors, just like the Tone Bender, and it says, future 3 germanium transistors, reminiscent of the Vox Sola Sound tone bender, Fuzz-Tone. So, I mean, it was made by Vox, so it's kind of the same.
Just one thing though. Go back to that picture. Go back to that real quick. Right there where it says JMI did not stop there, distortion. Just read down where it's in parentheses. See picture at right. He says the Vox tone bender, Fuzz-Tone pedal. See picture at the right. The picture on the right is not a fuzz pedal. I don't know why he says that. That is a...
This is a Conqueror, right?
I think that was a Conqueror, yeah.
Yeah. No, this is from a Vox amp. I looked at.
But I don't know why he says that though. That threw me off when he says on the right. Because now I'm staring at that picture. I'm like, that is not a foot pedal. That's gonna be forever.
It's misleading. I think he's just trying to say it's the same as a tone bender, but that's confusing. But the Beatles, it's interesting. In '66, we didn't say when they got all this equipment, but it was really Revolver. We got the Pep Box, we got the Mark 1.5, and we get the 7120s. 4120 was the bass one.
Yeah, bass.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Got a lot of stuff, and they got Showman, Fender Showmans, which are very clean. But when we talk about Vox distortion on the amps, it's really similar to a fuzz.
Now,
right?
do we actually know if the Beatles ever actually used the Vox distortion on a record?
I would have to 100% say,
You think
1
Paperback
billion
Writer
percent
is?
say we know Birthday.
Lady Madonna.
Oh,
we know
Birthday,
that for
yeah,
the
Conquerors.
Because you hear
And
the
then-
mid-range boost at the end.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then that was just distortion turned on, distortion low, because on those amp, distortion channel is on the MRB channel. And that's the only amp where it is, whereas the Super Beatles, the MRB channel is different from distortion, I think. I forget. Now, the... I lost my train
But
of thought.
nothing on Revolver has that distortion turned on, right?
See, but we don't know, though. I mean,
think
I don't...
she said, right? She said,
Yes.
or Dr. Roberts.
Yeah, I would say
Maybe.
so, yeah.
You think, okay, so you think she said.
But at the same time, hang on.
the Good Morning solo, that's all tone bender, right?
Well, that's Pepper, but yeah, I believe that's...
So that's not
yeah,
that's
there's-
not like the 730 distortion circuit and the tone bender. That's just tone bender, probably.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
But at the same time, like something like Paperback Writer, I know people are probably gonna say no, but that could also have been a 7120 just driven hard.
So I do have
You know?
only, except for Birthday, the only example I know for sure is the Vox distortion circuit. Granted, not on any of these amps. It's on a Vox Buckingham. I have a sample that, again, is on a Hollies record if you guys want to hear it real quick, just so you can hear what that distortion sounds like. The Hollies song that has this Vox distortion on it, I'm pretty confident anyway. It was recorded in January of '67, and this is on a Vox Buckingham, but it's this guitar on the left.
Oh yeah.
You see that you want me, and now that you got me, you're gone.
Yeah.
Sounds like
Oh,
the
that sounded
mid-range
like
boost,
MRB
right?
Oh, yeah,
too. So.
It does sound like, I mean, this is on a Vox Buckingham, so that would have had the mid-range boost, right?
Well, yeah, but I just thought that the channel was different. I didn't think MRB was on the distortion channel. Like when you turn on distortion, I think distortion was only on normal. I had thought.
But that does sound.
I forget. I'm sorry.
Now that I
everybody.
think about
I'm
it,
sorry.
that definitely does sound like Birthday.
Absolutely. It's a
$1,000,000.
mid-range. Totally.
And we
Yeah, I
also
heard the
know
mid-range
that,
boost definitely in that. But if
Yeah.
that was a Buckingham, though, it's same as Super Beetle. Buckingham, Royal Guardsman, Super Beetle, Viscount, it's all the same preamps. The same thing. The only thing that was different was the power supply and, of course, speaker options. And if it had a horn like the Super Beetle and the Royal Guardsman did.
But some other songs that, because Ryan was asking, do we know of any song? We know Hey Bulldog, if you see the session, the only amps are a Showman and a Conqueror. And there's no way that Showman made that sound. And I don't believe there was a fuzz on that session either. So a lot of it was Conqueror. And, I mean, Dr. Robert sounds like a Vox.
What about the what's the distortion on the
Helter Skelter.
deleted? I was gonna say the deleted version of "Got to Get You Into My Life."
Well, I believe that's a fuzz pedal. I was about to play that too.
Okay. That'd be fun.
Well, let me keep going through it if you don't mind, just because I think we're almost there. So that's Revolver. Some examples on Revolver. I don't know if we can keep this in, but I'm gonna play the
if it's like 3 seconds,
outtake.
it'll be fine.
Okay.
I was alone, I took a ride, I didn't know what I would find there.
So
That sounds like a fuzz pedal to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds like a fuzz
Totally
pedal.
is.
It's probably the pep box or the tone bender. And you also hear fuzz on well, here's Think for Yourself. I don't know if I want to play that, but Love You Too does have like a volume swell fuzz in it on
That's
the
gotta
guitar.
I don't think I've ever noticed that. That must be incredibly bad.
No?
Yeah.
I can find, well, I can show you guys if you want. The song track from Yellow Submarine has a really good mix with the
Oh, really?
the fuzz pedals. The bass on Love You Too also has fuzz on it. Let me play it really quick. Hold on.
Each day just goes so fast. I turn around, it's past. You don't.
You hear
Is
that
it
on
the-
the right
the-
right channel?
The drone.
I think it's mono.
Middle right.
Is it mono for me? Play
yeah,
it
it's mono. Yeah. I can hear
Okay.
it.
But I think I hear it. It's like very drony. I think I would have just thought it was some like a tambura or something.
Yeah.
Tambura.
There's fuzz bass, and then there's that like Love You While You Can. There's like a swell, and that's definitely like a fuzz with a volume pedal thing. So yeah, there's examples on Revolver, but before I go forward, I thought we could talk about the foot pedal thing, the volume pedal, because in Help, you hear that, right? On I Need You,
Yeah.
It's on Day Tripper, it's on a lot of
The
stuff.
first-
Ticket to Ride.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yes, it is as
The
well.
Yes, it
first
is.
example of to be a precursor to volume pedal. The first example I think of volume swelling is Babies in Black.
Yes.
Is that right? And there's a photo. I can pull it up real quick.
Yeah, I know that photo.
Okay, so this photo I've got here is from the Babies in Black session, I believe August 11th of 64. And this, I think, is the first use of volume swelling, where you see George on the Tennessean playing, and John is turning the volume knob manually. And George has a quote. I don't think he necessarily attributes it to this song, or maybe he does, but he says that he couldn't coordinate his foot on the pedal, but this is before they would have even had the pedal, right? They didn't even have a volume pedal at this point.
Well, when did they? Well, that's a theory I'm gonna get into.
But he just has John swell the volume with his hand, turning the knob. I think it's a little tricky because they're on 4-track tape, and there's 3 guitar parts on this song, so I still need to think about it some more. But it
in the
seems
solo,
like a
for
good
sure.
chance that John's doing this manually for him,
Mhm.
which I have no
It
idea
reminds me of
how we're supposed to cover
in-
that, do it accurately.
I was gonna have my wife sit down.
Oh,
and
that's
do the
awesome.
knob for like an
Please.
hour. It reminds me of Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly, because the main part of the song is the tone rolled. It's a strat with a neck pickup. But then for the solo, he wants to go to the bridge and do the bright. So, but he was strumming so much he couldn't switch, so he actually had a friend like do the switch for the solo
That's
and then
cool.
back for him. So it reminds me of that. But so getting into the foot pedal thing, the volume pedal, by Help we do hear. I think it definitely had to be the foot pedal, not like John doing it for I Need You. And we don't know exactly what was used, but I'm guessing it was some sort of Vox. If you go to the photos from those rehearsals, you actually see a foot pedal for the Vox Continental. So I'm wondering if they could have used that for guitar. But either way, we know, because looking at this equipment list from late 66, which I want to get into, you see 1 foot volume control. So we know by late 66 they had a volume pedal at
Another
least. So I'm guessing it was that.
interesting thing on this list.
Oh, you want to go back to it?
Number 20.
Yes. Thank you, Ryan. That's what I was going to get into. 19 is super interesting too. 1 special effect.
That's gotta
the
be
Vox
the
guitar organ.
V251, right?
That's the guitar
the
organ.
weird Vox thing.
Yeah.
But you also see 2 tone benders here 14 pounds each.
Huh.
And then Conquer. So this is late 66, after the tour and before Sgt. Pepper. So it's pretty interesting
Wait a minute.
to see.
No. 14 is one guitar organ. What the heck is one special effect guitar?
That is a good point.
It's not about the episode. I'm sorry, but
It is a very interesting
one
list.
wah-wah pedal. So they had a wah-wah.
Yeah,
One wah-wah pedal.
The fact that they had the Conqueror that early is pretty weird.
And they had 6 AC100s.
Also, where's the Conqueror? Oh,
Well,
never mind. I see. It's 21 and 22.
Conqueror was made early 66. Very, very, well, technically late 65.
So do
but
they
early
just have an
66.
extra speaker cabinet in case a speaker blew? Is that what that is?
Probably.
Yeah, must have been.
4,000
a
pounds.
gyrotone?
Jeez.
What's a
Yeah,
gyrotone?
it's very interesting. I looked up a gyrotone. It's another Vox amp, I think, or a speaker cabinet. I can look it up. Hold on. Vox.
Is there 2 Vox Continentals on that list?
I think so. Oh, it's a rotary speaker.
Oh,
the
that's
gyrotone. That's interesting.
Huh.
I
But this
see,
is
never
late.
Could have
This is
been
late
on,
66.
Yeah, it could have been on Lucy in the Sky. Or
This isn't.
knows?
That's not the one that's on. Tomorrow Never Knows, is it?
Could be. I don't. Some of these things they already had. Clearly, the AC100s and the
They would have had like a
Fenders.
Leslie B3 organ or whatever, right? Like not the Beatles, but in the studio.
Leslie cabinet. Yeah.
So they didn't
but
need that thing.
It could have been this though. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a very good question. We could do a whole episode on Leslie, but we know that by late 66 they have a wah-wah pedal, which was crazy to me because wah-wah only came out as a product in like fall of 66, like early fall. And the first use on a Beatles record is Across the Universe, which was February 68. So that was very surprising to me that they already had one. And I can show you what that looks like when we go to Let It Be. You can see that's a Vox wah right there. There's another pedal over here too. It could be a Vox foot control. I'm not sure.
Kind of looks
So,
like a
I don't
silver wah-wah pedal.
Yeah, this is a silver.
The
actually
other
pulled
one
up
looks like
some-
a poly. You know, like if you look at a wah-wah. Yeah, today. Like look at the chrome
Yeah.
one in the picture to the left. Kind of
Like
looks like
this
one
is
of
the one that
those.
you usually see like nowadays, but this is what George had. It's a gray, silvery one. Yeah, and he used that on, in Get Back. You hear him clicking it on and off. But Across the Universe, I think, is the only time it made it onto record, as far as I know. The wah pedal.
Yeah.
Which is when he wrote wah wah. Here's another picture.
Oh yeah.
And
Very primitive
yeah,
looking.
there's not much else to talk about
Yeah.
with wahs because he didn't use it much. So we've done foot pedals, we've done wah. The only thing left is fuzz faces. So between Revolver, I'm just gonna stop share. Between Revolver, Pepper, and Get Back, on the White Album, we do hear some fuzzy tones. Lady Madonna, I think it could have been Vox. Happiness is a Warm Gun. The solo
With the
sounds like a
bends,
fuzz
yeah.
pedal to me.
You think
I
that's
can
the fuzz
play.
face?
No, they didn't receive fuzz faces until Get Back,
Oh,
so
okay.
I think it could have been a tone bender. I can play. Mind if I play my clip from my cover
Oh, it's
here?
advertising.
Oh yeah. So that's my Analog Man Mark 1.5 tone bender. I think George must have used a tone bender or something on that song. But other than that, and besides the Vox amp whole thing, we get into fuzz faces in January of 69, and we see in Twickenham, John has a gray fuzz face under his twin reverb here, which looks just like this. And so fuzz faces are interesting. They were a 2 germanium transistor pedal, which is what the 1.5, if you remember, had 2 germanium. So it's actually based off of the 1.5 Dallas Arbiter made the fuzz face in England, so it was based off of that circuit specifically. And with the tone bender, when you got to the Mark II, they went back to 3 germanium transistors from then on. So fuzz faces are kind of like a weird, like modified tone bender Mark 1.5. Yeah. And I have this clip that I pulled together from the Get Back sessions where you can hear George talking about the fuzz face, and he doesn't know what it's called. And it's called a fuzz face because you can see it has 2 eyes and like a mouth, smiley face here. But he doesn't know it, and it's funny to hear him and Paul talking about what it is.
See what it's called? Wow, face. This pedal. Fuzz face, wow face. Look, when you press it, it switches it off.
Does that look like a voice? They call me Buzzface. They call me Buzzface.
Huh.
Right.
I thought you guys would find that.
Nah, that's funny.
Wah face, he says. Wah face.
Now,
So,
do you know if they used the fuzz face on anything?
So yeah, you see them appear and Get Back. You see that gray one, obviously here. But then when they move, George quits the band and they go to Savile Row. It's interesting because then you see a red-looking one, not the silver one. I have a picture of it somewhere here. If you look behind their roadie Kevin,
Oh, yeah.
you see a little red thing right there, and that's clearly a red fuzz face. So they made a lot of different fuzz faces in silver, blue, and red. But what's interesting is in '66 they came out and they had germanium transistors in it. That's what Jimi Hendrix used on all his stuff. And then they switched to silicon transistors, which was a little bit brighter but like more manageable. Like the germanium, when you put it under the sun, it like stops working. So silicon fixed that whole issue. You hear George in Get Back and John like in the Freak Out jams, like with Yoko and stuff. He uses a little distortion here and there, but it didn't really make it onto a record until I believe Abbey Road. I'm gonna play a little bit of Mean Mr. Mustard bass. So that's clearly a fuzz.
Yeah.
Probably was the fuzz face.
Who's playing
Don't
that?
know if it was.
Is that Paul?
Mm-hmm.
Is that
And that's
what bass is that?
probably Rickenbacker, or he had the jazz bass in the Hofner too.
Probably
It's hard to
Rickenbacker.
say. That's Sun King into Mean Mr. Mustard. So whatever was on
It's
one is on
definitely
the other.
it
It's a
keeps
Rick.
more of the bass
Yeah.
frequency there than like Think for Yourself. Think for
Yeah,
Yourself.
and that's the
ditches
thing.
the
Fuzz
bass.
faces are very like you roll back the volume on your guitar or bass, and it really cleans up nice. It's a little bit smoother than
I actually
Tone Bender.
I have a 1968 example of a fuzz face. I think I played it for you before, and you thought that's what it was. If I want another example.
Is it Hollies?
No, it's not actually. But yeah, on this song by the awfully named band, the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band, who have a whole story of their own. I'm pretty sure this is the fuzz face. I don't know. Sam could tell me if I'm wrong though.
San Francisco is there in LA.
Does that sound?
I would say so. That kind of sounds like one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you think of Jimi Hendrix, he's the best example, or David Gilmour of Pink Floyd.
Okay.
It's a very smooth, nice sounding fuzz. I have one here if you want to hear. I have both analog mans, so this is the Tone Bender Mark 1.5. And remember that both are 2 germanium transistors, but one is just a different type of transistor. They're pretty much the same circuit, other than one's British and one's not the transistor. So this is tone bender. And here is a fuzz face. Don't know if you could tell a difference, but
Interesting.
So, yeah, the only other thing we have to talk about is like, me and Mr. Mustard definitely is a fuzz, but what about those Abbey Road or Let It Be tones that are distorted, but they only had twin reverbs? How'd they get it? Like on the end, that part with John, like,
Well, that's a fuzz face for sure.
fuzz face, you think?
Yeah,
Dan?
absolutely.
I see. I think they wheeled the Conquerors back out. No, just kidding. No, it's probably the fuzz face. Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be. You know, they're sitting in front of the amp. What else could it be?
John wasn't wheeling anything but a bed in the studio that day.
Nah, yeah.
What about Let It Be or I Me Mine, though? Has some interesting tones there. There's a whole theory about, like, Chris Buck, who's a guitarist on YouTube, had a whole episode about, he thought it was fuzz face, but you see pictures of George with his casino into a twin reverb, and you don't see any pedal, I don't think.
It could have been a
Then the
crank
only
twin.
thing driven.
When he had it taped.
It could have been.
It
a crank
probably wasn't
twin.
hard to drive those amps.
Yeah.
Twins? They're really loud. They're like,
Oh yeah, no,
100
twin
watts
reverbs.
clean.
They do not distort on their own.
Yeah. Well, I never really played one.
Wish I had one of those.
Like early
Oh.
Bassman, that distorts, but by the time they got to the the blackface or at least, well, they're silverface, so it doesn't matter. But silverface, by then it was crystal clear all the way through, right? I actually tried because I had heard the thing about when I first did Paperback Writer, and people were saying it could be the Bassman. I was like, well, I've got this twin reverb here. How different could that be from a Bassman? It's a Fender amp.
Completely
I
different.
tried to get it to break up, and I was like, oh, no, that's not happening. Yeah. It stayed clean all the way up to 10. So
They're loud. I'm plugged into a black Bassman right now, and it's on 2, and it's pretty loud.
Yeah, they get loud. Yeah. Well, I think, did we cover everything? And more?
Yeah.
And more.
I think so.
I think we got it. The only other thing after the Beatles, you like on All Things Must Pass, you hear "What Is Life?" That riff. That sounds like a fuzz to me, but I actually have a theory that it's an octave fuzz pedal. I don't have it on my board right now, but in my cover I used it, and it's just like, it's a different type of fuzz that has a little bit of the higher octave in there, and I think it could have been a Fender, it's called a Fender Blender, was what they used back
Incredible
then.
name.
So, yeah.
Oh man.
Well, at some point we probably should go through and like actually list out all the stuff for like what songs we think stuff is on or was on during the session. But that's for another time. But yeah, let us know if you think we got anything wrong, or if you think there's other songs we didn't mention that should have been mentioned. And we'll probably do another episode on the Vox distortion, Vox amps more specifically.
Yeah. We got a lot more episodes to go on all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
You could talk about it forever.
Oh,
Hopefully, some of you guys listening are interested in that. But,
so please comment below. Let us know what you guys think. Who played the 12-string part on every little thing. And until the next episode, we will see you guys later.
Oh, no.
Oh.
Well, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one.